Hey everyone, welcome to another review play. This is of a shmup that I think might surprise people that I'm covering it because it's kind of fallen off the radar over the past year or two. This is Aka to Blue, or AKA to Blue, by Tanoshimas, who I believe is an ex-Cave developer or has some kind of past relationship with Cave, worked for Cave. So this can be seen as sort of a spiritual successor to a Cave game, and it definitely plays that way. So, in case you guys haven't heard about it, a lot of people in the shmup scene were really excited to see this come out. However, it's a little bit bittersweet because the only way to play this game is either on an iPad, iPhone, Android device, mobile gaming, or to play it on the Exa Arcadia in Japan. And I'm not sure where it is in Japan. I'm not sure if it's had an official release yet or not. But those are the only two ways to play it, and probably most likely will continue to be the only two ways to play the game based on what the developers' comments have been about, a Switch port or something like that. Personally speaking, I think that I would understand why they wouldn't want to put in the time and effort to bring it to something like the PS4 or even PC, as much as I would prefer it to be on PC. However, I do think even economically, they should look into porting this to the Switch, because even if they don't want to go through the trouble of adding traditional controls, and I could see why, because a lot of how this game played is sort of balanced around the controls of the touchscreen, I still think they need to remember that the Nintendo Switch has a touchscreen, and so you could just have it be touchscreen only on the Nintendo Switch. I know that would drive a lot of people crazy, but for me, I would still prefer a touchscreen shmup on a Switch rather than on the iPad and stuff, just because, I don't know, the iPad in my opinion is not that great of a gaming platform. It tends to lose battery all the time. Capturing from it, like with this, was an absolute nightmare and a pain in the butt, so I would even welcome a touchscreen only version on the Nintendo Switch, to be honest. So on the topic of touchscreens, I guess I should talk about that a little bit, because that is a bit of a contentious topic among different players, the idea of playing a shmup with a touchscreen rather than with a arcade stick or traditional control method. Personally, as you guys may have gathered by some of my other videos, like my Star Fox Zero video, I am open to the idea of different control methods and control options. I'm not super strict about having it to be one way. I try to be flexible about these types of things. So the idea is pretty interesting of directly controlling your ship via the touchscreen. However, just in my experience playing this, I feel like touchscreen controls have a lot of potential, but the way they've been implemented still isn't completely refined, in my opinion. I think there's some directions it could go to be improved. So just some of my advice with playing this game, because I did clear it, so I had to learn to play with touchscreen controls pretty well. And the thing is I don't know, I might have mentioned this before, but I'm actually ambidextrous, and I play guitar, and so I have a lot of really fine motor control practice, I guess you could say. Like, I'm really good at things like this, touch control screens or playing instruments and stuff like that. And so I picked up on the controls extremely quickly, and so that is one aspect of the controls that I think shmup players do need to give it credit for, is even if you don't like touchscreen controls, you have to acknowledge that they are an extremely accessible control type for people who aren't usually playing games, or aren't usually, gamers. And I feel like shmups are a genre that actually, if they were given a chance, could appeal to non-gamers perhaps even more than, stuff like FPS or even RPGs, because they're just so, they're pure gameplay. And so the appeal is immediate. So I do like the idea of touchscreen controls existing, and I don't mind them being a thing. The only issue that I have, and I think many other shmup players has, is that it's kind of a bummer that this amazing shmup is sort of stuck on touchscreen controls. There's not the option to play it on another platform with traditional controls for the players who really want to push this game and extend beyond just the accessibility, right? So as far as my advice for how to play this game well, because I do think you should buy it and play it if you're a Shmup fan and you have an iPad. I don't think I can personally recommend it if you only have an Android phone, unless you have like a huge one, or a iPhone, because I think the iPad is absolutely the best way to play this game because you need that screen real estate to really enjoy it, especially with the touch controls. That extra screen real estate really helps them. So that would be my preferred recommended way to play this game, is on an iPad or a tablet of some kind with a large screen. So anyway, I went through some different methods of trying to play this game effectively, because I did get the clear. And so I started with using a stylus, because at first I was thinking, okay, a stylus is going to give me more precision. It's going to feel like I'm, controlling it with a little more fine motor skill than with my finger. And so I started with the stylus. And the thing is, when you first try the stylus, it seems like the better option. It seems like, okay, stylus is the best way to go, because you do feel like you have a little bit of more control with it. However, as I learned playing the game, and especially when I got into the later patterns, the problem with the stylus is that it has a lot of drift, and it, unless you have some killer pro stylus I'm not aware of, they tend to have a lot of drift where they lose contact when you're going through patterns. So you'll end up losing focus on where you started. It's kind of a little bit hard to explain, but basically, so you start with your stylus behind the ship, and ideally it remains behind the ship all the time while moving, so you have that consistency of control. However, with the stylus, because it's not always really good about keeping contact with the screen, what will end up happening is your stylus will drift further and further away from its starting point, and so you get kind of skewed controls, and then when you get into really long, intense patterns, it ends up costing you. So I moved away from the stylus and then just went back to using my finger by itself, and I think that is the better option. Some advice is you want to press firmly, but not too firmly, obviously, because you want to be able to slide, but you don't want to lose contact, so that way you're remaining that consistency of control. Another piece of advice that really helped me, and I kind of figured this out from playing a lot of Star Fox Zero with the motion controls, is that once you get through a pattern or get to any sort of breathing point, always reset your finger back to right behind your ship. So always try and correct that drift as much as possible, because that's going to give you much more consistency, and you're going to start to get a feel for the controls a little better. As with any new control scheme, it's going to be a little bit frustrating at first to get the hang of it, but once you do, I think it is pretty fun and enjoyable. And it is kind of silly, some of the dodges you can do with touch controls, because you can insta-speed over across the screen in a way that you can't with an arcade stick or something like that. And you have extremely good micro control, I would say. The only issue, again, is that when you start going into really complicated movements where you're going up, swirling around or doubling back, any of that kind of stuff, that almost always creates drift, and you're going to have to quickly reset. And also another piece of advice is, I've found that when you're trying to cross the screen quickly, like let's say you're trying to get from left to right as fast as possible, I found that if you just direct swipe across like this, that will often lose contact with your ship and end up not working that well. So actually, you want to do kind of a Nike swoosh movement where you start and you do this, like that. That seems to get you across the screen much more quickly and consistently than doing just a straight swipe. I think just that it gives that little bit of extra contact to the screen. So that's another piece of advice. So talking about the game itself, I really like this game. I think it is absolutely the best mobile shmup I have ever seen. Another cool thing about it is that it's just a straight up purchase, $9, you've got the game. That simple. It's like buying a game on a console, or, well, it should be like buying a game on a console, but now console games are becoming mobile games. But that's the ideal scenario in my case, in my opinion. Just buy the game, play it. And if you're wondering, should I buy this? Well, if you like shmups and you're willing to use a touchscreen, yes, you should buy this, because This is definitely worth the price in my opinion. It's a really well made game, the patterns are really fun. The score system is really cool too, and the way the special system works. So the way the bombing system works, or whatever it is, it's kind of a cross between a Ketsui game and oh, there's another shmup it reminds me of, but it's not quite coming to mind. But anyway, here's the idea of what you do. So as you see in the bottom left there, there's the bomb, or hyper counter, super counter, Refrain. That was the game I was thinking of, Refrain. And so what you do is that, as you're playing, gather up, I think you might graze in the game. It's a little bit hard to tell if grazing happens or not. I think it does. But you build up that meter, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 is a full charge. And once you get that meter to... Oh, sorry, did I say Ketsui earlier? I meant Crimson Clover. Once you get that meter to 3 or 4, you throw, or 2, but mostly 3 or 4, you throw a Hadouken. You throw a fireball. And the thing about the fireball is that if it hits bullets, it cancels them. Not only that, though, it gives you points, and then when it hits bullets, it cancels them, it also refills your meter. So the idea is that when you're playing, you want to just throw your Hadouken into large bullet formations to get the cancels, and so it becomes a cool feedback loop of, you'll see in stage 5 and 4, where once you get that super, you can just keep placing that fireball over and over and over, and building up massive amounts of points and coins and stuff, as you'll see coming up here. Another thing that's interesting about this game that is definitely a product of being a mobile platform is that it is not a true arcade mode. There is no true arcade mode, there's no true that kind of thing. What it is it's all stage select, and then you unlock the next stage by beating the stage previous. But the stages don't carry into each other. So, for instance, let's say you get a maximum killer score in stage 1. That does not carry over into stage 2. Each stage is a score attack into of itself. So it kind of was interesting when I was doing the review play, because review plays I do a full run and get the legit clear, right? That's the idea. And this, I was kind of like, well, I'm gonna kind of cheat a little bit because it is a stage attack, so it's not truly beating the game is not going from stage 1 to 5 because nothing carries between the stages. It really is just a stage attack. So it was in order most of the time. So I did sit down and get these captures 1, 2, 3, 4, and I had to do stage 5 twice. So I failed the first time, then got it the second time. But considering that there is no arcade mode, that it is a stage attack, and also because capturing video on this thing was such a pain in the butt, I was like, that's fine. So there is no 1 credit clear of this game. It's just, did you clear stage 5? Did you not clear stage 5? Which is interesting. And then as for a second loop, because I checked into that, I was wondering, okay, is there a second loop after you clear stage 5? There isn't, but what it does is it asks you, okay, turn off autobomb now. And I guess that's the kind of second loop difficulties if you play it with autobomb off. I'm assuming you get some kind of bonus for doing that. And that is a big deal because this game's bullet patterns are brutal. You see there, I threw the Hadouken and then it sucked up the bullets and then I got my meter back. You see, I'll do this. Oh yeah. Also, it's a risk and reward too, because when you throw your Hadouken, you have no meter to autobomb. It reminds me a lot of Destiny too. Like, this plays quite a bit how Destiny works in that regard with the hypers and the cancels, where if you use your super or your hyper, whatever you want to call it, during that time you can get hit and die. So it's always a risk reward of doing that. But I found that there's parts in the later bosses and stuff where if you're not using your... There's actually one pattern where if you don't use your super, you can't beat the pattern. Like, the pattern, your regular bullets won't go through it. So I had a funny moment there where I was fighting against this pattern for like 5 minutes and I was like, why isn't he dying? Then I realized, okay, I have to super him to kill him. So I really like the stage design and the graphics and visuals. The game looks awesome. I feel like it does kind of follow where Cave left off a bit with its graphical design. Not as not as good as SDOJ as far as the overall, but I really like the way it looks, and for a mobile game, yeah, it's definitely bringing the heat. It looks better than any other mobile shmup that I've seen. And so it is a little bit of a shame that this is the only way to play this game, is on like I've said before. But not to be too negative about that, is that it is worth the price and money if you get a hold of it. So here we finally get to some of the later patterns, and you'll see that the auto bomb here is very kind. And so let's talk about the difficulty of this game, because that is an interesting consideration. So I'd say without auto bomb, if you turned auto bomb off, this game would be pretty damn challenging. Probably harder than DOJ Black Label 1-all with the auto bomb off. With it on, it is easier than that. I'd rank it. It's hard really to rank. Maybe definitely harder than a Toho normal clear, but not as hard as a lot of Toho hard clears. Kind of in between there. And then it also, I'm not sure how well other people would do on the touch controls. I feel like I kind of had a knack for them. So that could also be a barrier for players. But I could, see, the issue with this game, though, is that it really doesn't belong locked onto mobile. Because like I said, the idea of a mobile game, right, is something that you'd probably play on your phone when you just got time to kill. And the only issue is, unless you, I guess if you have a big phone with a big screen, then yeah, I guess it'd be fine. But like on my just Android phone, I can never see myself playing this game effectively on that, because you do need that screen real estate to effectively control and play the game. So that's something to keep in mind too. So if you don't have an iPad or a larger phone, it's a little bit harder to recommend in that case, because yeah, you're going to struggle to control your ship very well. But still, $9 isn't too bad of a price in that scenario. There aren't really any extras or anything like that. It's just the 5 stages, and that's pretty much it. And then if you want to play with auto bomb off as kind of a challenge, the second loop challenge, you can do that. But there aren't any extra modes, or there aren't any arranges or anything like that, which makes sense. This is supposed to be kind of just a budget release. But yeah, that would be cool if they released some. Do mobile games have DLC? I assume they probably do, right? You get like a DLC of it where you get an arrange of some kind. I'd be really curious to see how well this game sold on mobile, as opposed to how it might sell on a Nintendo Switch. Because I sort of feel like it would sell reasonably well on the Switch in terms of shmups, but I have no idea. I know that the mobile market for games in Japan is just out of control good, so I could see why they just focused on that. So maybe one day I'll have to do some digging and see what I can find out about mobile sales versus console sales when it comes to this genre of game. Like the Cave Android, like the Cave iOS ports, right? They redid them, so they must have been somewhat worthwhile to have redone them or updated them. And I'll probably review those as well, just for the heck of it, and then it'd be fun to contrast the difference between them. Yeah, I guess I forgot to mention that the way that this game works, just the basics, is when you touch the screen, you just automatically shoot. And then to release your super, you touch the screen with your second finger. Another reason why a stylus isn't that good, because hitting that screen with the second finger with the stylus is pretty tricky, even if you use your left hand or whatever. Some of the issues I had playing were in the intense patterns like this one here, or in the intense levels. What can happen is your iPad or whatever can start to slide around. And so I had to basically use, my recommended way to do this is actually to hold it with your left hand or right hand, depending on what hand you are. To hold it and then and grip it pretty well and kind of tilt it at a 45-degree angle and then control it. Because I did try laying it down and then kind of hovering over it, but that hurt my neck a lot, and it also made the thing slide around. So the best way to do is just hold it with one hand and control it with the other. Another interesting thing that I think you can only do with touch controls is you can do, instead of doing a tap dodge, you can just do a really slow slide instead. So that's cool. That's kind of the equivalent of tap dodging with touch controls. Really, if you think about it, there is no reason that touch controls can't be just as effective as regular arcade stick controls. The only issue is that touch controls is with the buttons, with the firing, with your bombing, right? Because you're typically locked into using only the screen. But I would love to see a shmup come to a console like the Nintendo Switch, because Switch could do this, right? Because Switch has touch controls and regular controls. Find some sort of system where you can incorporate some button presses somehow, or I'm not sure though, because you got to hold it with one hand and then slide around with the other. That is tough to figure out how you would do that. That's the big question with touch controls in these games. I guess you could make some kind of special stylus of some sort, where you have a stylus and it has buttons on the stylus, and so as you're sliding it around, you'd make a good one too that has really good contact, and then as you're sliding it around, you hit the buttons on the stylus. That would be interesting. Or maybe you have a stand that holds your Switch for you, and then your left hand, instead of holding it, it's on the stand. Maybe that would be better actually. So you have a stand and it holds your Switch or your iPad, and then in your left hand you have the buttons, so like your firing buttons and stuff, and then in your right hand you are controlling the ship. That would be really interesting to see happen. Any developers out there who want to get creative with controls. Because I honestly think if you had that configuration where you could control the buttons with one hand and control the ship with the other, you might be more capable or equally capable playing with touch controls than you would with regular controls. Because, like I was saying, the issue with most control schemes is tap dodging and moving in diagonals and stuff, and moving in kind of like arcs and stuff like that. Like a really bad D-pad or things like that make that really challenging. Touchscreen, that's not a problem. And then as far as tap dodging and micro dodging goes, it's actually really good because you can just press down on the screen and like barely move your finger and get some really refined movements. And then also, if you really wanted to take it hardcore, you could get like a big ass screen too. Instead of like a little iPad, you get like a monitor sized touch screen. That would be pretty crazy. So the monitor, like, game is like the size of a monitor, and then you're having a controller in your left hand and you're using your right hand to touchscreen. That would be a great arcade setup, like at an arcade. Japan, think about that. That's my proposition. So here we go, coming into the final boss. This guy, yeah, stage 5 was challenging. It took me 2 tries to clear it in the recording, and I had to practice it probably 5 or 6 times to get it there. Stage 4 was also, I think, had to practice it 5 or 6 times. The good thing is I have a lot of legacy skill with cave games at this point, and this game kind of plays a little bit like danmaku Unlimited 3. It really does in some ways. So I also had that going, where it's got that cave style, but it also has some Toho elements like this here. This is almost like a Toho pattern more than a cave pattern. So yeah, this game makes me want to play more SDOJ, to be honest. Just to compare it to SDOJ, because this is, I think, a little bit more on the Toho side of things than that game is even, but I absolutely enjoyed this game a lot. The only issue that I mentioned before is that it's on the iPad, and for me to play on the iPad was a huge inconvenience because it's not a gaming console. Mostly because it loses charge a lot, and yeah, so you have to plug it in, and you know, my family uses the iPad and stuff too, so it's not my own dedicated machine either. So I think my thought would be, at the minimum, I think they should just release it on the Switch, and if they want to be lazy boys, they could just release it with the touchscreen controls as are, and just say, okay, play this in touchscreen mode. It would be interesting, though. Yeah, no, I had an idea, and no, it wouldn't work, never mind. So that would be my hope for this game, is that they would release it on the Nintendo Switch in some way. Because I think that would probably be the most likely place for them to get sales. I do wonder what the overlap is between mobile game players and Switch owners. It's probably not that high, right? But at the same time, does this game really appeal to most mobile game players? I'm assuming probably not, just because it is basically a hardcore shmup on a mobile... That got me one of those times, but I dodged it this time. On a mobile device. But I don't know. Maybe there are like casual mobile players who love shmups and they sell well on there. So yeah, that was the game. I think this is probably the only video that I've found on oh yeah, the final attack here. The only video I've found on YouTube of the game in its entirety. I'm not sure why, but I think it's mostly because capturing this game is a pain in the butt. You need a really good iPad to do it, honestly. So, yeah, I'm hoping you guys will check it out. This isn't a must-buy because it's, you know, you have to be into this sort of thing to buy it, I think. But the game is designed really well. The scoring system's really fun. The challenge is there, especially if you take off Autobomb. And, yeah, so... And there's no training mode or anything like that. It's all score attack. But I think the way the game's designed, it's not really that necessary, because you're basically just playing training mode at all times anyway. Yeah, this ending goes on forever, and what they're saying in Japanese. It's funny that, so, this company just releases it. You can get this on English, you know, just right on iTunes if you're an American. But at the same time, M2 won't, you know, take the time to do that with Ketsui on the PS4. Even though I think it really doesn't matter. All you need to do is change the menu text and stuff, and that's basically it. So, yeah, come on, M2. Release Ketsui and the other ones, and Esperade in the English regions. Yeah, Max Chain 999. There is no leaderboards or anything like that. There's that share button. And I think that just tweets or something like that. I'm not sure. I didn't hit share though because I didn't know where it was going to go. If I was going to start sharing scores with my like relatives, friends and stuff, I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. So I'm not sure what the share button does actually. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a little bit about this mysterious game. See ya. See, and there's the Autobomb. Oh yeah. And before I go, let me shout out my patrons. So thanks for the support Dingo, Kiwi, Young Money Sui, Psych, Garen Tungate, Himmel, Jake Ryan, Joe Angelo, Kay, Maz, Nathaniel Davis, and Plasmo. See ya!